We really want to bring Clarice into this conversation. It's a lot of what we asked Dr. Bailey, Clarice, to help us sort through. But there's a couple of things I just want to share. I'm a storyteller, so seriously, I could talk all day, but listening to you all is why I'm here. And I've never lived in a place that's 100% safe for me. Not ever. That takes its toll. It's part of how my life is. So there's two short stories I want to share. Both of my parents born in the Virgin Islands. My mother, my maternal side, lineage from people who were stolen from Africa and sold to the Danes and ended up in the Caribbean. My father is white and from the French Islands. And after they had 4 kids, they moved from St. Thomas to the Bronx. This is like 1953 or something. And in order for them to rent an apartment, they had to tell people my mother was from Puerto Rico and she wasn't from St. Thomas. They didn't share this story till I was like, 20 when they shared this. And at that point I say, did those landlords know Puerto Rico was only like 48 miles from St. Thomas? Like it was the difference between being Spanish and being black. And so they're raising this parcel of mixed race kids in New York in the 1950s. And I'm thinking, I'm 20 at that point, and I had no idea what they lived through in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, but I know what I've lived through. And so it take all the way forward to me having 3 boys. And the night that Trayvon Martin was shot, I live a life of privilege, unlike many of the folks who came before me, and having to sit my boys down and talk about safety. They probably had felt fairly safe for the first 10, 11 years of their lives, and having to talk about what it means to live in this world. There are many of us who carry that. We carry it every day. And my dad, God love him, told me find a reason to laugh out loud every day, so I have a lot of laughter in my life. But I also carry all those things in a bag behind me. And, and it takes a toll on us. And I think that's part of the discomfort, I guess, that I'm sensing here in the room. And it's really important in order for us to imagine what comes next. How can we be a part of imagining what comes next? To just bring all of that history along with us. But I'm hoping when I sit and get to listen to you all, I hope you get to listen to each other. There's so much opportunity and potential sitting in this room. So we're hoping to surface that. That's part of bringing you all together. So I got asked to introduce Clarice, and God, she said yes, and that I have her permission to do that. But it reminds me that my son, who's an architect, give me a microphone. My son's an architect, and I was asking him one time, why is it so hard for architecture to do things differently than the last building and the building that got built 10 years ago and 20 years ago? And he said, Mom, the principals at my architecture firm were trained by people who were trained by professors who were born before 1900. So we keep building the same things because they're basing it on what they learned, and we don't see that generational connection between what they learned, who they learned from, and how it's impacting what young architects get to design today. So he said, I'm still carrying stuff that people learned in 1900 because that's who folks have been trained by. I think it's true in healthcare. I think it's true in so many things that we don't recognize. We're still carrying something from 100 years ago while we're trying to be radical in our imagination. So 6-ish years ago, Nicole and I had to write a project plan for the Healthcare Authority. And one of the questions was, how are you going to sustain this ACH work once this Medicaid waiver is over? And Nicole, our colleagues across the state were like, we're going to have the MCOs pay for everything, and we're going to change the way hospitals do their work. We're going to change the way people navigate through the system. And what we wrote is we're going to focus on building relationships among the partners within our region. And we got asked to do this right back, like, what do you mean? How's that going to make a difference? But it was all about relationship. And so you all being in rooms with each other, working with each other, that was our scenario. And almost everybody that I've known for any length of time, I've been introduced to by somebody else along the way. And so I have a colleague that some of you know, Diana Bianco, and last fall we're planning a symposium, across ACH symposium, and the person we were hoping to have come falls away at the last minute, and Diana says, I have this colleague, Clarice Bailey. What do you think of bringing Clarice Bailey into the mix? And so I go to Clarice's website, and I'm thinking, wow, this sounds really great. And for those who have been at the HCA Learning Symposiums, they are not the most forward-thinking meetings that can occur. They're very much about the here and now. And Clarice impressed our team. I think we had 10, 11 people from our team that were in the room, and we're doing a group picture outside in the courtyard at the hotel, and they're all going, how do we bring Clarice to the next learning symposium? And so I called Clarice or emailed or something, and her request was all I had to do was bring her a vegan cupcake, and they'll be here. I did my part, and there's the connection to all of this. Clarice helped us not think about practice in terms of scopes of practice, competencies, but how do we practice? How do we actually do this work? Practice it knowing what came before and what we can do looking forward. And so I'm just really grateful. Clarice is mic'd up, so she doesn't have to get this microphone, but I think Clarice I'm the bridge to continuing this conversation, so we're not shifting to another thing on an agenda, but just want to welcome Clarice into this space and with lots of gratitude.
I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Let me just be real clear. I was not sure how that was going to go, but that was good. That was fine. This conversation that you're currently in is the conversation that we are going to have. We are going to talk about stuff. And now my whole brain is just like, oh, good God Almighty. So I will say that language is critical. Right, as we've been in this room this morning, having this particular conversation, there are languages that no longer exist. They've died. Done. Over. Not to be restarted. So language is huge, right? Language is huge. I have to make sure I don't distract myself, because I can do that too. So I am calling, and because I have a microphone, and because I'm up here in my little Let's Work jumpsuit, I am calling this container, this space, this time, an imaginarium. It means that whatever you think is fair game. It means whatever you bring to this space from whatever your background is belongs in the space. Because the thing that we lose language, right? We lose all this stuff. One of the other things that we've lost as a group of humans trying to exist on the planet is the ability to imagine. So it's not going far enough is reflective and a symptom of our inability to imagine that our world could be any different than it is right now. That everything is finite, everything is. And, some of that's true, but it's not how we have to operate. It's not how we have to move. So we're going to consider our space together as an imaginarium, which is a little bit magic. And I just need to say that I may say fuck. Because that's how it is, right? The shit is fucked up. So let's talk about what we think we're going to try and get through so that there's something to our little container. I'm supposed to be able to use this anywhere. Oh, wait, I have to turn it on. It's tremendously fabulous to be old. Yes. Say that. Again and again, right? Help me.
Right side.
Oh, wait, there it is. So, our Imaginarium, we're going to start by building a community of practice. And I'm real into language, so I'll define these things as we go. They're my definitions for today, for this moment, for right now. They'll hold up as good as lunchtime. We're going to build ourselves into a community of practice. And so these three things are the tools, the pieces, the stuff that makes up a community of practice. There's a domain, which Jackie is asking about, right? What's the context? What are we trying to get to here? There's us, right? We're the community. We're the community. And fortunately, we had yesterday to get us into some semblance of right relationship, but we'll play with that just a tiny bit today. And then all that we do on this planet as humans trying to navigate this, all we do is practice. None of us get any of this 100% right 100% of the time. That in and of itself, that belief is white supremacy in action. We're not going to get it right. People who are concert pianists practice the C scale. That's like the basic. I remember. Okay, I can't play the piano. So this entire thing is a practice. Everything that we do is practice. And we only get finer points on our thinking, on our being, on our doing by practicing. So if you say something that's weird or it feels jacked up or people respond to you like, that's okay because you are practicing. What is not okay is not being in the practice. That's the only thing that's not cool. I would offer to you that this will not be psychologically safe space. I don't believe in safe space. I don't believe safe space can exist. As a Black American old person, I don't believe that there's such a thing as safety. What I invite you to search out and bring and hang on to is bravery, is courage, is the courage to say, whoa, wait, just stop. We need to, but what about? Or something that's really jacked up. So that the practice of being uncomfortable, the practice of being comfortable, the practice of saying, hold up, is what we're doing. So I invite you into our Imaginarium as brave people, as courageous people who are willing to think thoughts that you might not have thought before. To hear stuff, take it, and reshape it, reframe it, turn it, twist it. So that's the invitation for the next amount of time until you're sick of being in here with me. Now, housekeeping. On your tables are pieces of white paper that's rolled up, some markers, Post-its, the hexagon things from yesterday. Because you know, facilitators, we have to have toys, right? These jobbies, they're sticky too. And there's this little bag of treats. Good job not messing with it. These little bags of treats. The invitation is to fiddle with, because I'm going to talk for a little bit before I put you to work, and I am going to put you to work. To fiddle with these popsicle sticks, stickers, the little glittery things, and the hexagons. So, like you've seen in an auction, you know, they have those little signs that they stick up. I'm inviting you to make a little sign for yourself. So there's a glue stick you have to share. I'm not buying 200 glue sticks. You know how this goes. You can decorate it however you want. This is to keep your little hands busy while I yammer at you until it's time to do some work. But I encourage you to do it fairly quickly because there's a set of questions around community. You only got to get through domain before we're going to be at community. And you're not going to get to like being at your table talking and carrying on because I'm going to be talking. Yeah, do it. So here's something for you to stick in your brain while you're sorting out your popsicle sticks because there's writing on them. So if this is an Imaginarium, then I'm inviting you to think about the suffixes ISM, ism, racism, classism, sexism, ableism, ism. We can create language to serve our purpose. So if this is an Imaginarium, then I would invite you to be trying to come up with imaginisms. What are the imaginisms that we can promote out in the world? Equitable school is an imaginism. Democracy is an imaginism. In this country, in these United States, we've never practiced democracy. That's still speculative fiction. So at this point, democracy is an imaginism. And what does that make you? So classism, sexism, we have races, we have classes, we have sexes. That makes you an imaginist. Live in being an imaginist. One who imagines. One who has the courage to imagine. And our Imaginarium will become a practice that in and of itself is radical. We have taken imagination out of schools, out of, our bones. So to simply imagine is in and of itself a radical act. And that's what you're being invited into. Got it? That's where we're going. So I was whispering over here to Michael when you all were talking, because, I don't have any home training, that a radical act for me, we're going to talk about systems. I'm getting you ready, right? We're going to talk about systems. A radical act in my mind, an example, so I'm an imaginist for real. A radical act would be to do away with psychiatry altogether. That would be, for me, a radical act. Because in our bones, in our cultures, in our land, in our toenails, we do know how to heal. Because we're part of the planet. We're not separate from the planet. And left to its own devices, the planet knows how to heal. So I would, in my little, very demented mind, I would really like to not have psychiatry get all the money, resources. That's not to say that there aren't people who need to have another person to work with. That's not to say that there are not remedies that people need that are helpful, or I don't know need, but that are helpful. But the amount of chemicals and all of that, I say let's get rid of psychiatry. You do with that what you want. So what's the domain? Why the heck, right? Why the heck? Now remember, you're going to have to stick these little things up at some point, so make sure they're kind of stable. And if you need, right, if you find that your table doesn't have all the stuff, there are other tables that are smaller that have stuff, and you can go get it. So as we do this process, I invite you to hold space for each other. One thing that we are in no short supply of when we give ourselves permission is caring. When we get out of our own way, we have an overabundance of care. And so I'm inviting you to hold space for hard conversations by caring for each other. And this is what I'm suggesting that it looks like. However you can be here, wherever your edge is of discomfort, of I can't believe I'm right, go there, but monitor yourself. Know when it's enough. Know when you have to adjust and turn and go back to doodling, right? Let it be as much as you can. In yoga, right, the idea is you get all the way to the very edge of what hurts, of doing twisting, and then you back out. You take a step back. So find your edge, go to it, pay attention to yourself, and then take a step back. Take a breath. When you feel like you can't be present here in this space with the people at your table, with me, with each other, lean on somebody. Say, whoa, I need, help me out here, I'm drifting off. If you see me drift off, yell at me, bring me back. Because, we're working at being present. So I invite you to be as present as you can. But when you find yourself not, then just ask somebody to help you out and bring you back. Kick them under the table. Don't kick people. Everybody that's here is doing the best they can. I learned this from my youngest, who I was convinced that I had ruined as a child. My youngest is now, approaching 40. But I believe I ruined them. And at one point, we had one of those real kid conversations. And the response was, you were doing the best you could with me, with what you had and what you knew. And I love you. I love you for that. I'm grateful because it taught me that I can be the best I can be in any moment. And that doesn't require anybody else's discernment or deciding what that looks like. So we can hold that in our imaginarium. We can hold that for each other, that we're all doing the best we can with whatever we're dealing with right now at this moment, which could be fabulous, it could be crappy. You don't know. And that's the next one. You don't know what people have walked into this room with. You don't know what it took for people to be in these chairs at this moment. So don't assume. Rather, hold the belief that we're all doing the best we can do. And we're all, between now and the time you leave, every single one of us is going to fuck up something. That's just how it goes. Sorry. It's true, right? It's just how it is. Our work is completely relational, right? For whatever reason on this planet, we decided that this was the work we wanted to do. It's based in relations. It's all about relations. Liz was saying that in the intro. But it's not all about you. It's just not. We spend so much time and energy wondering what people are thinking about us. They're not. They don't care what you got on. I spent 5 minutes in the mirror this morning looking. I was like, oh my God, I've got this on. I got the cats all over it. Why didn't I? And then I was like, nobody's going to look at that. Nobody cares. Because they're too preoccupied with themselves. Don't be looking at my shit, Natasha. They're too preoccupied with themselves. Our work is about deepening relationships, being in relationships, holding relationships, caring. But it's not all about you. And so you don't have to make it about you. You can take that weight off and stick it in the corner. So this is what I consider holding, creating a space that I'm calling an Imaginarium for you to release, open up the floodgates of all of the stuff that you've wanted to see wherever, because it's all connected. Black feminists back in the 70s wrote a treatise, right? This proclamation thing. And the bottom line of it is, if black women in the United States are free, everyone will be free. If black women were free, everyone would be free. White men would be free. White women would finally be free of white men. All of us would be free. So, definitions. For the time of us being in the Imaginarium, I'm offering these definitions. So, one of the places that I am trying to move us is around equity. And equity is it's becoming a very tired phrase. Right? It is becoming one of those things that rolls off the tongue because that's what we're conditioned to do, right? So I'm going to offer you my definitions of these little terms, and then maybe you'll see how they fit together as you do your work. So we're getting to community, get those little popsicle sticks together. So the first word that I want to offer is race. My definitions. Race is an idea that Europeans made up in order to retain dominance over other people. Initially, race had nothing to do with color. Initially, race was really how to get the servant population in line so that me, as a person with money, power, whatever, have people to work for me. And those people generally were not people of color. They were generally poor white people, right? Poor, I won't even say white people, poor ethnic groups in Europe. Capitalism brings us into a wonderful opportunity to then figure out how to make money off of race. And at that point, genocide, stealing, going to get, negotiating with, buying and selling, complicit with Africans. We can't continue to hold the mythology that folks on the continent didn't participate in slavery, because that's simply not true. Capitalism is a powerful drug. So race is this thing that people made up in order to have over, right? Whatever, you can fill in the blank, over. The operative in this sentence is made up. We bought it. We buy it. We collude with it. And that does not mean that we don't see color, because that's just not real. And if you make pretend that you don't see me as a black person, I'm not having it. Because that removes my history. That removes all the stuff that my great-grandparents went through, right? Because you don't want to talk about you, big you, right? Don't want to talk about that as much. To hear David mention this morning the missing of being able to locate ourselves. And I feel that envy. I feel that envy when other people talk about their past, because I can't quite get my hands on it either. I can't. I'm from Salisbury, Maryland, which Maryland really tried hard to be a slave state. But we don't find slavery in our family. We find some white people. But we don't find slavery. But I don't know who those people of color were. I would love that they were indigenous, but I don't know that. And I knew my great-grandparents. But the tracking, the data collection, all of that, right? So race is this thing that we can't ignore, because that ain't right. And we have to talk about it in ways that allows us to deconstruct it. So that it doesn't have the weight of you're better than me, you get more than me, you have opportunity, blah, 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 blah. And that we hang that on the color of our skin is stupid. There's no other way to talk about it. It's just stupid. So that's my definition of race. It's just stupid. But it exists. And as long as it exists, don't you dare go to colorblind, because I'm not having it. You're going to see me you're going to see me and know that somewhere somebody that looks like me has stripes on their back. That somebody that looks like me was surrounded by somebody that looks like you if you're white, and their kids having a picnic when I was being lynched. So you're not going to forget. We're not playing that game. So this notion of diversity. So at one point, everybody was being trained on cultural competence, as if we could be competent in somebody else's culture. You can't be. Let it go. Take that weight off. You cannot be competent in somebody else's culture, nor should you be. I am sure that Harriet did not walk around saying, I need you to be competent in how I'm running the Underground Railroad, because, I want you to be my friend. All of our cultures, all of our ethnic groups have secrets that are about our culture. And that's okay. You don't need to know, because it's what has allowed folks to stay put. The hard part, the hurt part, is that the times that cultures have opened to colonizers have generally resulted in their genocide. And so, you don't need to know everything. So, this idea of diversity, instead of being cultural competence, is really about counting. For the data people in the room, my data friends who really just want us to be able to measure things differently and think about it differently and work on it differently, diversity is it's just representation. It's how many microphones are in this room, how many people wear glasses, how many cups we need, how many popsicle sticks, how many black people, it's just counting. So when you're talking in your organization about, we need diversity, if you're saying you need representation, then that's different than saying, we want somebody who's a peer to come in here and tell us that our policies suck, and we're going to change them because they tell us. Those are two different things. If you want somebody to just come in and be the face that's brown or black or whatever, great. Admit that you just want them to come do what you want them to do, right? You just want them to assimilate. Nobody wants to do that. That's dumb. Inclusivity then, right? Can't we all just get along? We belong. I don't want to belong if my belonging means I can't be me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to get to the door, now that we're back at getting to our doors. So I'm in my car. I'll back up. I'm in my car. I'm listening to, who am I listening to? Funkadelics probably. And I'm, doing my little dance. And I get to the door I park the car, I get to the door, I don't even have a car. I get to the door of the office, I open the door, and suddenly I am Dr. Clarice Bailey. Because that's how you need me to be. I'm not doing that. And you should not expect people to do that. Inclusivity does not mean, belonging cannot mean that I just do the way white-based, normative, cisgendered organizations replicate their work. Don't nobody want to do that. It's 2023. I shouldn't even be having this conversation. Inclusivity means that when you say to me, I really want you to look at this policy and give me some feedback, that you're going to take that feedback and you're going to make a change. You're not just doing it for shits and giggles, to say that you talk to people. You're not bringing people to the table. Your table probably isn't even the right table. Inclusivity is not giving people voice. If you are giving people voice, you are still operating in a way that says they are less than you. And you can't. So these are things you can catch yourself, right? This is called the practice. You can catch yourself as you go. If you kind of like my definitions, if you don't, I don't care. And finally, there's this notion of equity. Right? Equity is reflection. Equity is when an organization reflects the interests, the worries, the concerns, the joys, the imagination, the forwardness, the backwardness, the all around of the people that work there. And the structure, the policies, the practices, all of that is indicative. So these are the ways that I think of these words. I don't believe for a microsecond that we will make any progress as long as we still have offices of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Back in old days, I worked in university, and we had offices of minority student affairs, right? that evolved into offices of multicultural affairs, right? That evolved into offices of diversity, that evolved into DEIB. And they were all of that structure within an organization serves to marginalize groups of people. Because you must need something special in order to survive, in order to be successful. I would invite us to think, instead of how do we fix the people that come to us, how do we dismantle, abolish, recreate, because you have to put something in place, the systems that replicate oppression. And so if the question is, what are we radically reimagining? My encouragement, I mean, you can do what you want, but my encouragement is that you radically reimagine how you think about working in systems. Because either, and it's really not binary, because we all have to do what we have to do. But either you're pushing against them and you're saying, I might lose my job here, but I don't think that's right. Or you are colluding and making sure that that system stays intact. And there's in between. There has to be in between, because we're all on, this is one of my new little things, we're all on the train. We're just in different cars. And some of us are in the caboose. So I encourage you to think about how you operate in the system, what you do when you say, but our funder wants, our funder, we got to get this money to stay afloat. Our funder needs this data, our funder. What are you doing? The question then is, what are you doing to educate your funder that their requirements are biased and oppressive? You have to do something. Somebody's got to tell them. And as long as you churn out those reports, which you can do with your eyes closed, nothing will change. And you'll be sitting in this room asking the same question. What does it mean to radically reimagine how we are in the world, right? We better figure it out sooner. There'll be no world to be reimagining nothing in. One of the things that we have to think about, folks of color, generalization. I got that, right? Folks of color really experience the impact of oppression as overlays of overlays of overlays, right? So as a person of color, as a person who may be gender non-binary, as a person who may be differently abled, as a person who may be old, all of that determines how I show up in the world and the things that I know that I need for myself. That is not to say that folks who represent white folks don't have intersectional realities, because we all do. And all of this stuff mashes together. An example of a failure, of a system failure that speaks to intersectionality is you have a family who's been over-surveilled by the Child Welfare Agency, who now have all of these requirements. People need to show up at meetings and do all this stuff. And at the same time, because they've been over-surveilled, one of the kids is now in the juvenile justice system. And the requirement for the juvenile justice system contradicts the requirement for child welfare. So out of compliance immediately. The family also perhaps needs assistance with some food, but they can't go get food, which is ridiculous, right, that we even have this conversation about food security, because they have to be at a child welfare thing, right? So we cause these intersectionalities, and we don't think about the impact. That's the work that you get to do, right? Systems work is the radical reimagining. because you are all part of this system. And how you show up and operate in the system will determine whether it stays the same or whether it changes. And I am not talking about tinkering around the edges. I am not talking about renaming the Office of Minority Student Affairs to be the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I am talking about a radical shift in how we even think about how service gets provided and who dictates that. It can't be dictated by the psychiatrist who needs to get X number of patients and have them use X number of pharmaceuticals in order to stay in their job. It can't look like we continue to build facilities of incarceration because if you build them, they will come. Nobody's standing on the corner saying, build me a jail so I can go there. We have to say no. We have to say no. And then, right, so I'm getting in the car and going so I'm taking a step back. If we decided that punishment was not the only way to change behavior, we wouldn't need jails. We wouldn't need jails. We wouldn't need corrections as we know it. Corrections as we know it, policing as we know it, came out of a need to punish slaves who left the plantation without proper papers. So this notion in this country of using punishment as behavior modification is fairly sick. And I would say, we really want to keep psychiatry alive, let's send people who think that using punishment as a way to control behavior to psychiatrists. Give them some drugs, hook them up. Because we know from the research, we know from child development, we know from the research that punishment is not the way. But we keep it going, which gets all tangled up, right? All tangled up. Popsicle sticks ready? The time has come. So a community of practice is an opportunity for people to come together around a table of their own making, to talk about, work through, work on, hammer out, imagine a problem, a thing, something they want to impact, something they want to see be different. So this is a huge community of practice, right? Whether you start with what do we mean by radical reimagining, or whether you go right into how do we make sure that the workforce is 99.9% peer-driven. No matter where you start, right? You start with this thing you're going to work on. This quote by this is a healthcare person. This is a public health, actually. Public health has the most moving right along way of thinking about equity these days. And so the three elements that we have to have are people, right? The community, not just tell me what you think kind of community, but the people, right? The healthcare system, whether it's your nonprofit or it's the big one, has to be there for transformation. Has to be there for transformation. They have to say, okay, we're going to transform. But I don't want to, but we're going to do it. And finally, it really does need to, we do in healthcare, right? We have to look to public health because they've been doing it. The folks in public health have been collecting the data and doing the research and in the communities and getting their feelings hurt and having to rethink their way. Yep, totally. So we get to look to them. We don't know. We might as well look to somebody who's been doing it. And that's not to say that you haven't. Understand that. But public health has models. And we have to have some little roadmap. Otherwise, we're just... You want to see that one more time? I have to make sure I'm in the right place. I haven't touched this. I've just been talking. La, la, la. La, 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 la. So that's the building. I never didn't even show that, did I? So we don't need to talk about that anymore. Oh, yeah, we do. All right, back to it. Raise your popsicle stick. It's interaction time. This isn't the work. This is just interaction time. Raise your popsicle stick if you've been working with more than 5 people in this room for more than 5 years. Raise your popsicle stick if you've been working with more than 5 people in this room for more than 5 years. So that's part of your community. You all are like the historians, right? You're the historians. You can talk about how you got to be here today. Raise your popsicle stick if you personally talk about race and class and disability and gender and all the stuff more than once a week. Look around and see who's in community with you. It may not be as dire as you think, right? There's people. Raise your popsicle stick. If you have a practice, practice for resolving conflict that generally results, now this is the kicker, that generally results in personal or professional growth. So I'm not just talking about this kind of conflict resolution. You raise your popsicle stick if you have a practice of resolving conflict. So I want to point out that maybe some of the people that had comments that made you uncomfortable actually have practices for doing conflict resolution. And if you are uncomfortable, you can talk with them about how to move from everybody's uncomfortable with conflict, from the icky to the resolution, to the restored, to the transformed. This is what it means to be in community, right? Popsicle stick up. If you listen to and incorporate ideas that are different from your own regularly, not just like, okay, but regularly. If you incorporate ideas that are vastly different than your own into your work, regularly, raise your popsicle stick. Put it up high or don't come to play. What can you learn from these folks, right? What can you learn when you feel like I can't, they're not going to let me? What can you learn from the folks who are incorporating new and, hopefully radical thinking into their work? Because they're doing it on the regular, so they're practicing it, so they're getting better at it. It's not a once and done. Raise your popsicle stick if you don't always know the right answer. keep your popsicle stick up if you don't always know the right question. Right question. Keep your popsicle stick up if you're like sick of doing this activity. Y'all are so sweet. Oh, you don't want to do it no more? We're done. We're done with that. So then the question is how, right? How do we move into practices that allow us to actually address this thing of anti-oppression, moving from just jargon and performance to really digging into the deep, really digging into the deep. So the domain, to Jackie's question, Jackie was asking about the domain for this time together. The domain is really, really digging in and trying to think about how you all work together, how we all work together differently to create and to nurture communities that are alive and bustling and doing great and imagining new stuff, that are healthy because they are using traditional practices along with science. And science is a big word that takes into account traditional practices. Right? That this isn't just a line, but that it's real. That it's real. That we can go into a Western medicine facility, and if what we really need is Chinese medicine at that moment, that person at least has sense enough to tell us, go get some Chinese medicine. I know some tribal folks that are doing some interesting things. Go talk to them. You don't need this chemical. Go talk to them. So we operate in a system called this United States, right? This system that is actually not a class system, but it's a caste system, right? One of the misnomers, we'll be cute with it, misnomers is that we live in a class society, but we do not. The difference between a class society and a caste society is that in a caste society, you never really get to move. Doesn't matter what money you have. Doesn't matter. You are stuck in that slot. And we can be real excited about Beyonce and Jay-Z and all their money, but they are still black folks, and you cannot get it twisted that they are still black. They can't buy themselves out of their skin color. And that's what makes us a caste society. So how do we break those walls? Those walls are so good and so strong and so durable because that's the definition of a system. The definition of a system, part of what makes a system, is that it's durable, right? Your car is a system. If it were not durable and you got in and in the morning your car turned into like a Fred Flintstone car and you had to get to work, that would be a system that's not durable. We can't have that. But in the replication of itself, when it comes to humans, that durability keeps us from being able to make change. So let's talk a little bit about systems, and then you're going to go to work. How am I doing? I should check. How am I doing for time? It doesn't matter. Just keep going till I'm done. Okay, there'll be no lunch today. I'm just checking out. You don't have to tell me nothing. One of the first things, right, is Again, back to this point, how do we build shared understanding? How do we make sure that we're talking about the same thing at the same time? Which is why I started out with definitions. Because at least you know what I'm talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, but at least you know, you have a way to locate your thinking in what I'm saying. So imagine getting the right care, the right time, using the right tools to the right people. That there is even still a conversation in this country, in counties, in cities, in jurisdictions, about whether to have naloxone available is unconscionable. And who can access it? Doesn't make any sense. We created a condition, right, where people became, because of hurt, because of pain, became addicted to a chemical, and we are debating whether to have a life-saving device available because they're just kids. We need their permission, their parents' permission, all of that. Those are system errors based on a premise that was messed up, right? That a pharmaceutical company could fix our historical trauma connected to physical pain because of how we had to work, where we had to work, under what conditions we had to work. But we don't want to keep somebody alive. And everybody has a choice to be here or not. But, so if you want to imagine one thing, imagine getting the right tools to the right people. Oh my God, we can't have 12 minutes. I know, time is a construct. It's some white normativity bullshit. All right, I gotta hurry up. All right, we're gonna talk about the iceberg. No, we're not gonna do this now. Forget this. Absolutely, no, not quite. We just ignore it. We may pretend we didn't see that. So by the takeaway, the point of this is that we made this stuff up. 12 minutes, the opioid. We created this stuff, which means that we can uncreate it. I mean, we can't undo it, we can't unsee it, right? But we can move beyond it. We can make that choice. And the idea is that, of course, it was shaped by people who benefited. So one of the questions that you get to ask about every single policy is who benefits from this policy? And then if you're courageous and you're brave, right, you're going to hear the wrong hard answer. Who benefits? Who benefits? And if you can have that conversation, then you can say, and who is being burdened? Because we've all participated in it, whether we're the benefactor or whether we've been burdened by it. We've participated. But fortunately, the young people that are really teaching us what it means to not think in a binary way, an either or way. Thank goodness for gender fluid people, because they are teaching us to think differently, because the experience of gender fluidity causes us to think differently. not 1950. If you haven't checked out Adrienne Maree Brown, I saw somebody walking, they were walking fast, I couldn't grab them with a book, one of Adrienne Maree Brown's books yesterday. If you have not checked out Emergent Strategy, check it out. It will inform your thinking. It will absolutely, right? So this is us. Underneath the planet, while we're sitting here, right, the trees are communicating with each other where we haven't screwed them up with pipelines and stuff, right? The trees are in communication. The plants are in communication. They're informed by the fungi, the mushrooms, right? The mycelium network. Put your feet on the floor. Put your feet on, this is a directive. Put your feet on the floor. Put both feet on the floor. And just imagine that from your feet are roots. And those roots are extending through the concrete that we made, the carpet, through everything, and are connecting to this universal conversation of health, of well-being, of sustainability, of tradition. We are part of this network, and when we interrupt it with human-made crap, we are interrupting our own lives. So when you feel like you're about to fly off the planet because you're so angry, you're so hurt, you're so messed up, confused, you've given up, put your feet on the floor and remember that you're connected beyond the concrete to the mycelium network that is in conversation all the time when we are not interrupting it, when we arrogant humans are not interrupting it. You can open cross your legs again. Right, so this, I talked about this. I'm gonna move us so that you have a few minutes to practice before we get shut down. So you have to practice, right? This is what I'm gonna ask you to practice. Mycelium. This is an iceberg. People that do this work, we love icebergs, we love triangles. So this is an iceberg. This is how systems operate. Okay, this is the down and dirty on systems. There are events. Like icebergs, we only see 10%. Icebergs, we only see 10%. Titanic, ice, right? Because there was so much underneath the water, we couldn't see it. If you haven't seen Bowen Yang's iceberg on Saturday Night Live, you deserve to see that. Just tuck that away. It's hilarious. So we only see the top 10% of anything that's going on in your organization. It doesn't matter what role you are in. You will only see 10% of what's going on. Underneath that are all of the historical practices, all the habits. They're really the patterns and the habits and we've been doing this like this forever. We know how to do finance. We've been doing it like this forever. Those are just at and under the waterline. And then the things that legitimize those, we've been doing this forever, are the policies, which then get translated into law. Your legislature will say, you need to do this for this much money. And the big giant piece under that are the stories that we tell, right? The mental models that we carry. So part of the work is really examining how you think and the stories you continue to tell. I don't know what it means. We'll figure it out. Because it's 2023. And none of us have all the answers or all the right questions, but we can figure it out. We got big brains. We got big brains. So then what does this look like in like real play, right? So examples of historical, I know this is tiny, examples of historical and things that keep us here. Just think about one of these, right? That folks who speak Spanish as their primary language go to Western Health for care. Doctor talks doctor talk. Cultural norm says you don't necessarily push too hard back because this is a professional person who has a degree, who's done all this stuff. And you leave, and you don't know what they said, and the translator is giving you very specific translation because they really just majored in Spanish. They are not indigenous to the language. That's an example. That's an event, right? That's a thing that happens, right? But that's only 10% of the issue, right? Underneath are the practices and the patterns and the habits. Well, we're hiring Spanish translators here. But that's really just reinforcing the inequity. That's not addressing it. We say that only people that were credentialed in the United States should be able to practice medicine. I mean, really? Like all these other people on the planet who've been alive for like millennia didn't figure out how to stay alive? I mean, there's something about this logic that doesn't make no sense, and we keep being okay with it.
Last year, they did a policy to allow Spanish-speaking degrees from other countries because they cannot meet Washington's need, basically.
Oh, so now that the need
The need is so great.
The need is so great, we'll take those people. We'll let them come here and practice. When in fact they should have been practicing all along and informing the way that we do healthcare in this country. Because everybody doesn't do it as jacked up as we do it. And it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be the jacked up way that we do it versus socialism. There's something in between them. So policies get put into place. Now we're going to change our policy so that it's okay to have, I don't know why it's okay on January 26th, but it wasn't okay on January 25th. Sundown laws that still are on the books in my home state of Oregon, which say that I shouldn't be on the street after dark. We're not even going to talk about the schools. Education is one of the systems, as bad as the other systems are, education is the one system in this country that has not changed since its inception. And then we get into the stories, right? They don't trust us. Well, they don't trust us because there's no trustworthiness. The way that we do things in this country is better than anybody else. It's not. We have lots to learn if we gave ourselves the ability to the space to, if we didn't destroy imagination. So what are you being asked to imagine? Everything. Because that's the time that we're in, that you can imagine everything to be different. And what you imagine doesn't need to be short-circuited, right? It doesn't have to be, well, we can't do that. Well, of course we can. Of course we can. And so I'm not going to stand between a room full of people and food, number one. And we have a conversation. So there were kind of three questions, right? We have the, what does it mean? How do we imagine this? What are some of the really foundational pieces? And I'm suggesting to you that thinking about systems, thinking systemically, not just about your particular place, but how what you do impacts 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. 7 steps up and 7 steps down is the work. That is the work. That's the practice. We have a couple of folks who are going to share experiences and a bunch of experiences maybe about how they have moved from nothing at all to having remember, we're all on a train, so the train's going. We have to be in different cars sometimes. But how they're approaching equity, how they're thinking about race and class and gender and all that stuff in an organization where that didn't exist. So, obviously I can talk for 3 days. I encourage you to really, really sit with how you move your system. I'm incredibly grateful that you gave me eye contact, that you hung out with me, that you played with the little popsicle sticks, and that you're here. Because just being here means that you're in the container of the Imaginarium. So how do you take up your role as an Imaginist? And what are the Imaginisms that you can start to put to replace racism and classism and sexism? So thank you so much. And why don't you stand up and stretch it out a little bit, kick your feet, and then sit back down. And we're going to have our the next two folks come up. Yay!